I know I've kept you waiting. Wait, that's not from Funny Girl. Honestly, I don't think Funny Girl has a lyric to really articulate this situation. Don't tell me not to live, I simply gotta. Oh my god, hey! Welcome back to my theatre-themed YouTube channel. My name is Mickey Joe, and I am obsessed with all things theatre. I am a professional theatre critic and content creator here on YouTube, and I recently went to New York for the very first time to see a bunch of shows on Broadway, including Funny Girl. I was ready this time with the playbill. Yes, the much talked about revival of Funny Girl at the August Wilson Theatre on Broadway, currently starring Lea Michele. Talked about by many people, including myself here on YouTube. So as soon as I knew that I was going to be going to New York, I figured I've been making a lot of videos all about this show, talking about its casting, talking about its opening night reviews, reacting to the cast recording when that came out. And you can go and watch all of those videos if you haven't seen them already. They're a fun time. Equal parts drama and belting, which is always a great recipe. But it was starting to seem a little bit conspicuous, at least to me, that I was talking about this show so much from over the other side of the Atlantic without having ever seen it. So, like I said, as soon as I knew I was going to be going to New York, I thought this is a must. And in the interest of transparency, this is also one of the shows that I bought tickets for while I was in New York. It may in fact have been the most I have ever paid for theatre tickets. This is a hot ticket right now. And I do not mind telling you, they were expensive. But with a high ticket price comes a lofty sense of expectation. You really want to enjoy a show you are paying that much to see. So today, I'm going to be letting you know what I thought of this revival of Funny Girl. As we all know at this point, it did not get fantastic reviews when it originally opened, and much has been said about the pivot in its lead casting. So I'm going to be letting you know not only what did I think of the show, but also what did I think of Lea Michele as Fanny Brice. We all know she can sing, but was she a funny girl? And does that even matter? All of these questions will be answered in today's video. If you enjoy this review, make sure to subscribe to my theatre-themed YouTube channel for many more review videos coming soon, as well as a lot of other stagey content. You can also hit the link in the description to become one of my channel members. For just £2.99 a month, you gain access to all of my videos before anyone else, as well as some exclusive content. Before I tell you what I thought about Funny Girl on Broadway, I am curious to hear what you thought. If you have seen this revival with anyone playing Fanny Brice, let me know what you thought in the comments section down below. Now, let's talk about Funny Girl. So for context, I just want to tell you a little bit about the history of the show and the plot. So Funny Girl originally starred Barbra Streisand on Broadway. It was adapted for film, and it's kind of synonymous with Barbara's rise to megastardom. And largely because of that, the show had not been seen on Broadway since. It had had a bunch of regional revivals. It had been done in the West End, where I saw it at the Savoy Theatre with Sheridan Smith, with some of the same creative team behind this production, interestingly enough. But various attempts at mounting a Broadway revival had all failed, until one finally materialized, starring Beanie Feldstein. Now, much of the criticism for Beanie Feldstein's performance had to do with her vocal ability. Her voice did not resemble the belting powerhouse that Barbra Streisand is famous for and originally brought to the role, and many actresses have brought to the role since. Despite the fact that the show is called Funny Girl, it's really more about the singing for a lot of people who are buying tickets. Because in fact, this is not the life story of Barbra Streisand. Funny Girl, the show, is about Fanny Brice, a vaudevillian comic. And the show follows her rise to fame as a successful comedienne, as well as her tumultuous relationship with Nick Arnstein. It also features a score by Julie Stein with some very memorable hits such as People and Don't Rain on My Parade, not forgetting the lyrics by Bob Merrill. The original book is by Isabel Leonard, which has subsequently been revised by Harvey Fierstein, and is probably the creative aspect of the show that comes under fire the most. I do credit Harvey Fierstein with some improvement in this book, and I think generally one of the issues is the scope of the show not quite being wide enough to really be satisfying as a narrative, but we're going to talk about that in a little bit. For now, I don't want to make you wait any longer. I'm going to tell you what I thought of this production. So both this production and the last London revival were directed by Michael Mayer, and I wasn't the biggest fan of that production. I enjoyed Sheridan Smith's central performance because I think she's a fantastic actress as well as being a wonderful comedian, but I thought the staging was all very obvious in this sort of a sepia tone box. The aesthetics weren't particularly thrilling. It wasn't giving me a lot of showbiz razzmatazz, which in a show like Funny Girl with a score like this I feel like is something that you want. Comparatively, there were a lot of things I enjoyed more about the Broadway production. And I want to talk about David Zinn's set because I think it's very clever in terms of helping the show gain some sense of a pace, because the book is a challenging thing in Funny Girl. Fanny Bryce stays on stage for much of the duration of the show, which is for the best because it's not particularly captivating when she isn't on stage. The plot, unfortunately, is very thin and it lacks subplot, or what ought to be the subplot is the only plot. We follow her rise to stardom, which is dealt with fairly quickly. She becomes something of an overnight sensation, whereupon she meets Nick Arnstein. The two of them begin a passionate and increasingly codependent affair. This is going very well at the beginning, and then the balance of power starts to shift when she is bringing in more money than he is, and this threatens his fragile masculinity. But the entire show takes place within Fanny's gravitational orbit, and while there are other named characters like her friend and her mother and various vaudeville bosses that she works for, they don't have any plot of their own aside from their interactions with her. And I feel the downfall of Funny Girl is that it does really push the comedy to the back corners of the stage in favour of this romantic tragedy. It's really more like A Star is Born set in the time of vaudeville. Because a more gratifying plot perhaps would be following her career with the romantic fallout happening as a subplot underneath that and looming in the background and gradually rising, rather than us turning away from anything to do with her career and focusing solely on the relationship from about halfway through the first act. In any case, like I was saying before, David Zinn's set design does very well to keep things moving. It does this very clever thing that I haven't seen before, where you have this circular revolve in the middle of the stage, and we have this very tall cylindrical structure with two sides missing. So we have sort of two opposite quarters, and that can turn to create different sets, and then turn sideways, so we see this corridor through the stage. And they use that to do scene changes, they use it to create different locations, but I think it's a very clever staging approach in terms of being a little bit different to just flying in flats or bringing things on sideways. I also do think it helps to convey this biographical connotation of a life that is constantly spinning around and changing and shifting between different years. There were some tall staircases at the sides of this, and I thought everything about the set design was very stylish. I appreciated the lighting. The London production was just far too bright and too open. This one felt darker, a little bit more noir, a little bit more intimate. It doesn't feel like a jolly comedy. It feels sort of dusky and romantic because that's what the show is. The show has an identity crisis from the off, I think is what I'm trying to tell you here. And there's a choice for you to make when you're staging it. You can portray it as the thing that it claims to be, or you can recognize it for what it actually is. And I think Beanie Feldstein was cast with one of those ideas in mind, and Lea Michele very much represents the other. But I am getting ahead of myself. The only aesthetic thing that I didn't like about this production was the curtain pre-show. I like the light bulbs all around the proscenium, old school Broadway, loved it, fantastic. The curtain, why do we not have an actual red velvet curtain? I'm confident they can afford one. Instead, we have this flat on the front of the stage that just comes in and out, and a curtain is painted on it. This bothers me. When did we stop having actual curtains? It may be a fire safety thing, in which case, fine. But I just miss a lush red velvet curtain. And I think there's something about going to see a Broadway musical with a red curtain and to have it pull apart, I think would have been a lot more exciting than a flat that just rises up, like it's a pantomime curtain. I enjoyed the choreography very much. That's Eleanor Scott for the main choreography and Iodel Casel for the tap choreography, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more later on. I really enjoyed those numbers, but we do start to care about them just a little bit less after the introduction of Nick Arnstein, because they just start to feel like filler scenes rather than anything actually important. For that reason, my favourite parts of the choreography take place earlier in the show. In terms of Michael Mayer's direction, I think he's got a fairly decent grasp On this show, like I've said before, I think it's a little bit unwieldy, but I would much sooner level criticisms at the writing of the material than at the direction, because I think all of the jokes as written land, all of the emotional moments tug at your heartstrings, all of the big triumphs soar. He achieves everything that it's possible to within the confines of this material. And let's face it, so much of the show simply rests on the shoulders of the actress who is playing Fanny Brice. This is an undisputed star vehicle, and I think it's time I tell you about its star. So as a very brief disclaimer to this, because I've had this conversation before on my channel, I'm mindful of the accusations that have been leveled against Lea Michele. I have also seen her response to this, and at the end of the day, I do not know her personally. I briefly was stood near to her when she was queuing for a beverage at ragtime, but for the most part, I do not know the woman. What I do know is that she's conducted herself very professionally for the duration of this Broadway run. She has scarcely missed performances, and there has been nothing negative emerging about her from her colleagues backstage. And in any case, I don't think the answer to any of this is to deny her the opportunity to work. She's an actress, she's working on the stage, this is her job. My job is to review it, and that's what I'm going to do. And I have to say that in this show, she is undeniably a star. It's a complete star turn, and she's quite fantastic in the role. And she delivered an awful lot of what I was expecting going in. The vocals sound phenomenal. We've all heard her sing this material before on Glee. I had listened to the cast recording, but how well she delivers a live vocal on a Sunday afternoon in New York, it was just stunning. In the 2 weeks I spent on Broadway seeing over a dozen shows, there were few vocal performances that sounded quite as pristine and packed the punch that hers did. And there's a lot of singing she has to do throughout this show. I appreciated that she wasn't just giving you a Barbra Streisand impression. I was appreciating that she managed to find her own take on it while paying homage to someone who is very clearly her idol. But some of my favourite things that she did speak to what I wasn't expecting from her performance, which was the vulnerability and the acting and the heart. She has far more charm and charisma and likability than I was expecting that perhaps she might have. I thought she was just going to be this mega talent who wasn't particularly endearing. But from the beginning, from her first entrance, she's goofy and charming and quirky, which is everything Fanny Brice needs to be, but that we weren't sure Lea Michele would be able to deliver. And throughout, when she's singing the music that makes me dance, when she's singing People, when she's singing her various sad reprises, she is making choices that steer her away from these big, powerful belt notes and instead giving you acting moments, giving you sincerity and heartbreaking vulnerability. And I give her an awful lot of credit for that. She has a very believable arc and a journey throughout the show. She is quite convincingly a young girl at the beginning. She's able to play a fairly decent range of ages on stage because she does still come across as very young, and then she reads slightly more womanly, but still a naive sort of a womanly in the second act. Now, when I saw her, her son had just come home from the hospital, and all of the scenes around her newborn child and talking about leaving her child to go back to work for the first time all felt very raw and were presumably rooted in a decent amount of emotional truth. Her chemistry with Ramin Karimloo as this sort of an offbeat relationship really worked for me as well, but I'll talk more about that when I tell you about his performance. Obviously, her best moments on that stage are standing and belting out these ballads. That's exactly what we know her for. She's incredibly skilled at doing that. One of the best right now, I think. That being said, she does still commit wholeheartedly to these vaudeville numbers, like when she's playing General Schwartz or when she's playing a pregnant bride. They don't land hugely, and I don't think she's necessarily rip-roaringly funny, but I also don't think that the material is. I think it would take a hugely gifted comedian to be able to ad-lib and characterize these scenes in a way that actually have you in stitches. Ultimately, she is not the funniest girl, but I don't think the show necessarily needs you to be a funny girl. I think this here on my t-shirt is a massive case of false advertising. But in terms of her singing, her acting, her commitment to the characterization, I thought Lea Michele did a tremendous job in Funny Girl. Like I said, a star turn. You can feel her enthusiasm, her desperation, her drive, and truly throwing herself headfirst into this material. When she opens the second act by climbing out through the orchestra pit, it's such a winning moment, and she does it with such gusto and such, pardon the pun, but glee. It is very difficult to sit in that audience and not warm to her, even a little bit. But she is not the only person on stage, so why didn't I tell you about her leading man as well as some of the other members of the supporting cast? So Ramin Karimloo, a performer I have seen on stage before because he has worked very much in the West End. I'm enjoying this renaissance he's having within his career as a dashing, bold leading man. I think he's a fantastic actor, wonderful singer. Of course we know this. He's done Les Mis, he's done Phantom. He is clearly a very gifted tenor. And he's kind of perfect for Nick Arnstein. He is very well cast in this role because it doesn't ask an awful lot of the performer, but he can deliver the vocal prowess. He can go toe-to-toe with her vocally. He exudes this suaveness and charm. He does the whole tall, dark and handsome thing, and he projects an awful lot of confidence in the first act, but he's very good at stripping that away in the second to reveal this little bit of anxiety and doubt that prompts him to make these deeply questionable financial decisions. His performance of the whole final Lea sequence in the 25th anniversary concert of the Phantom of the Opera just shows you what he can do in terms of spinning out of control. And we see a glimpse of that in his Nick Arnstein, just the littlest touch of it. The one moment where he lost me slightly was in the dance break of A Temporary Arrangement, but I don't think they should have him dancing in the middle of this number. That's a creative choice that I disagree with. I think he is performing it and singing it strongly enough. We don't need to see Nick Arnstein dancing with the male ensemble as part of that song. Tova Feldscher, meanwhile, is playing Fanny Brice's mother, and Tova is such a veteran of the Broadway stage. She recently celebrated this huge milestone anniversary as a performer on Broadway, and she is like perfectly cast in this role. She's been playing variants on this role as a Jewish mother, as a slightly overbearing Jewish mother for many, many years. She did a similar thing on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. She's done Gypsy before, and this is just another shade of that characterization. But she's funny, and she's charming, and she's gutsy and feisty, and everything we know that Tova can do if you've seen any of her performances before. Simply put, she is perfect for this role. I don't know why she didn't open the revival. There's been a lot of talk about Lea Michele as a very different type to Beanie Feldstein, but I also think that Tova was the obvious choice to open this as Fanny Brice's mother from the off. And there is one more performer I want to talk to you about in this cast, and his name is Jared Grimes. So he was nominated for a Tony Award for his supporting role in this production, and he is wonderful, but especially when he is tap dancing. This is a really winning moment, and it's one of the few moments that gets a real amount of audience recognition and applause and enthusiasm that doesn't contain Fanny Brice. Because the sheer prowess and grace and athleticism with which he tap dances is just unparalleled. I don't think I've seen anything quite as impressive as this in the realm of tap dancing before. It is so fast, it is so precise, it is just show-stopping. It actually stops the show cold. Now, as far as my favourite moment in the show goes, I think Lea Michele delivers the big numbers well. The People and the Don't Rain on My Parade. I don't think Don't Rain on My Parade is staged in a way that can really compete with the iconography from the film, with Barbara on the boat in the orange. I think just having Lea Michele just stand there and belt it out, people are thrilled, people applaud mid-song and they love it and they stand up and it's a big moment. But I feel like it's a little bit of a lazy creative choice to just use her skill to land that and not support it with something else, to not stage it in a slightly more impressive way. We don't have to go full defying gravity and boost her into the air, but you could do something with that as the end of Act 1. The other melody that people are really anticipating is People, so much so that when People is played in the overture by the orchestra, it actually gets applause, which is something I don't think I've ever heard before. But similarly with that song, I was just a little bit underwhelmed. Not disappointed, but it was just as fine as I was expecting it to be. She did a great job singing the song, she stood there, it was emotional, it's what it is. I don't know if I've watched the clip of Julia Murney bringing unparalleled star quality to that song in the concert version in the early 2000s a few too many times, but it's a little bit hard to top that performance. Now, my favourite moments in this show came later on in the second act. I think Lea Michele was really at her best, landing some of those sorrowful acting choices. And when she and Ramin Karimloo get to duet together on this angsty romantic ballad, Who Are You Now? And they are both singing at the very top of their range, I think that right now is the highlight moment of this show. To see those two together, both just pouring their skills out over the August Wilson stage. I think they're a wonderful pairing and it's a thrilling moment. In a similar vein, I enjoy their first duet in the first act when they're singing I Am Woman, You Are Man. I think that's charming, it's funny, it's a little bit outdated by today's social standards, but again, it's enjoyable because of the way they both put it across. So those have been my thoughts on Funny Girl at the August Wilson Theatre. I hope you have enjoyed this review. I know many of you have been asking for it for a very long time, and you've been waiting to hear what I thought about Lea Michele and this show. I hope that this has been worth the wait. If you did like this review, and if you want to hear more of what I have to say about other shows, make sure to subscribe to my theatre-themed YouTube channel. Like I said, if you click the link in the description, you can become one of my channel members to see my videos earlier than everyone else. I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day. For 10 more seconds, I'm Mickey Joe Theatre. Oh my god, hey. Thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!